In the heart of the Sahara Desert lies something so vast it can only be seen from space, a perfect circle, concentric rings like the iris of a colossal eye, silently gazing at the sky. Satellites know it. Astronauts have seen it. But for anyone standing on the sand, it simply disappears, swallowed by the horizon. They call it the Eye of the Sahara, a structure over 40 kilometers wide, surrounded by theories, secrets, and a question that has echoed for decades. Is it merely a work of nature, or the mark of a lost civilization? From above, the Sahara looks like an endless sea of golden sand. But if you were flying over Mauritania, in a remote and inhospitable stretch of desert, something would completely break that monotony. A circle, enormous, nearly 40 kilometers in diameter. So vast that from the ground it's impossible to see in its entirety. But from space, it looks like a giant eye, staring straight up at the sky. Today, science calls it the Richat structure. But for the astronauts who first spotted it during orbital missions, it became known as the Eye of the Sahara, a hypnotic, almost perfect mark carved into the heart of one of the most hostile places on the planet. And that's exactly what makes it so intriguing. How can something so perfectly circular exist in the middle of a desert? Discovered in the 1960s, when astronauts began observing Earth from high altitude, the formation drew attention for being far too symmetrical to ignore. Over the decades, geologists, archaeologists, and even proponents of alternative theories have traveled there to try to understand what could have created it. Here's another curious detail. The Richat structure isn't visible as a circle from ground level. Those walking along its edges see only rocky slopes and hills. You have to gain altitude, a lot of altitude, to see its true shape. Imagine being in a plane flying over the Sahara and suddenly realizing there's a colossal design carved into the desert, as if someone had created a monument meant to be seen only from the sky or from space. Is it simply the result of millions of years of natural processes? Or could there be something more behind this formation that seems to defy chance? Officially, this enormous circle has a scientific name, the Richat structure. It lies deep in Mauritania, in the Western Sahara, far from any major city or known archaeological site. Its diameter is about 40 kilometers, large enough to fit an entire metropolis within its borders. From space, the formation appears as a set of concentric rings, like ripples frozen in stone. At first glance, the perfect symmetry makes it easy to think of a crater left by a massive asteroid. But geologists have ruled that out. This isn't an impact site. Instead, the current consensus is that the Richat structure was formed by millions of years of erosion combined with uplift in the Earth's crust. Rock layers of different hardness eroded at different speeds, creating the ring-like pattern we see today. Its age is estimated at hundreds of millions of years, long before humans existed. And its origin is purely geological, at least according to mainstream science. But here's where things get interesting. Even though there are other circular formations on Earth, none match the scale, symmetry, and isolation of the Eye of the Sahara. It doesn't sit within a mountain range or along a riverbed. It's just there, standing alone, in the middle of an endless desert. This isolation has led to decades of speculation. Because if you remove the geological explanation for a moment, the Richat structure's layout looks strangely intentional. From above, it resembles the remains of a planned, circular city, complete with water channels and outer walls. And that's why the mystery hasn't gone away. In 360 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato described, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, a lost city called Atlantis. According to him, the city was circular, composed of concentric rings of land and water, and had carefully proportioned dimensions. For centuries, the story was considered nothing more than a myth, an allegory about power, corruption, and the fall of empires. But from time to time, a discovery emerges that reignites the question. What if Atlantis really existed? This is where the Eye of the Sahara enters the conversation. When we overlay the dimensions described by Plato onto the measurements of the Richat structure, the coincidences are unsettling. The ratio between the rings, the total distance, and even the presence of possible channels, now dried up, align surprisingly well. Some supporters of the theory claim that, in the distant past, this region was not a desert. Satellite images and soil analyses indicate that thousands of years ago, the Sahara was green, with rivers, lakes, and abundant life. In such a setting, the Richat structure could have housed an advanced civilization, destroyed by a cataclysm. For skeptics, this resemblance is pure coincidence, an example of how our minds tend to find familiar patterns. But for enthusiasts of the theory, it's a piece that fits too well to be ignored. And this connection doesn't stop there. When we compare the imaginary map of Atlantis, based on Plato's texts, with a current aerial image of the Eye of the Sahara, the visual similarity is so striking that many believe they are looking at the very same thing: a geological coincidence or an ancient secret buried beneath the sand. Geologists have a clear explanation for the Eye of the Sahara. According to scientific consensus, the structure is the result of a geological process known as an eroded dome. Millions of years ago, tectonic forces pushed layers of rock upward, forming a massive dome. Over time, wind and rain eroded the layers, creating the concentric rings we see today. Studies indicate that the formation is not volcanic in origin, and rock analysis points to an age exceeding hundreds of millions of years, long before any possible human civilization. For science, the perfect shape is, in fact, the result of natural patterns that can occur, albeit rarely, on a large scale. But this is where the mystery returns. If the geological explanation is correct, how do we justify the precision of its dimensions when compared to Plato's descriptions? And how do we explain that its location matches the narrative of a kingdom beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean, considering that the geography thousands of years ago was radically different? For some, it's pure coincidence and fertile imagination. For others, it may be precisely in these coincidences that the greatest clues to our lost history are hidden. Among all the mysteries surrounding the Eye of the Sahara, none sparks as much curiosity as its possible link to Atlantis. According to Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, the legendary lost city was built in concentric rings of land and water, with dimensions strikingly close to those of the Richat structure. Supporters of this theory point to the similarities: the near-perfect circular shape, the number of rings, and even areas that might once have been channels or lagoons. Plato also described Atlantis as lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which some argue could include regions now within the African continent, if ancient geography was different. There are also reports of marine fossils and sediments typical of coastal environments found in the area, fueling the idea that, in the distant past, this region may have been covered by the sea. For mainstream science, all of this can be explained by the natural movement of tectonic plates and the existence of inland seas in Earth's past. But for those looking for signs of a lost civilization, the overlap between myth and geology is hard to ignore. And what if what we call a myth is actually a distorted memory of something that truly happened? The Eye of the Sahara is both a geological enigma and an invitation to the imagination. From above, its perfect shape seems to defy the laws of nature. On the ground, it's just rock and sand, yet it carries centuries of theories, doubts, and fascination. Perhaps it is simply the result of natural forces shaped over millions of years. Or perhaps it is a silent clue left behind by a forgotten chapter of human history. Whatever the truth may be, the question remains: could some of humanity's greatest secrets be lying in plain sight, and yet we fail to see them? If you also believe the world still holds mysteries waiting to be uncovered, subscribe. Our journey is just beginning.